wait for Bernadette.
I'm sorry.
All right, are you ready? Maybe you.
Good evening, Dr. Weldon.
No.
Good evening, Dr. Weldon.
Good evening.
Welcome to our bi-weekly virtual chats. The goal for the chats is to bring to the public general information, primarily using the platform of the fact that, as you know, I was recently elected as the Member of Parliament.
Yes, congratulations.
Thank you very much for number 7 Hampton South. And what I'm trying to do now is people in the area ask me questions, and there are things in the general public that I want to know more about. And I'll use this forum to actually bring it to the voters of number 7 in particular, but Bermuda in general. And the goal is going to be to make sure that we are able to inform persons and also try to eliminate what are the perceptions as opposed to reality. And clearly today, you being the scientist, and we'll get to an explanation in terms of the scientist versus a medical doctor, for example.
Yes.
But just to get started, we'll also advise the listening audience that if you want to participate, feel free for sure to send in your questions via Instagram or Facebook or email. And then also, if you want, you can actually call us. The number to call would be 538-8683. So, Dr. Weldon, let's get started.
Okay, I'm excited.
Good. Let's just go through your background in terms of your educational background. I know that my first introduction to you was a long time ago, when you were a lot younger.
Yes.
Through my wife, who was a school principal.
Yes.
So let's talk about that.
So I went, initially before I went to Port Royal, which is where your wife was my principal, I went to Work Preschool, have to shout out to Work Preschool, and then I went on to BI actually for 2 years. And then that's when I transitioned after primary 1 and primary 2 to then go to Port Royal. And I was there from P3 to P6. And then from there, I went on to Work Academy and was there until I went to university. So that's my Bermuda education history, as it were. Yeah.
And Bill was interested in terms of, as young people for sure, what was the transition for you in terms of, or when did you know that you wanted to be a scientist or a medical person?
So initially, I didn't really know about the field that I'm in now. I stumbled across that by accident, in a way, during my degree. I always wanted to be a medical doctor. And that happened from, I want to say at the time I was about 10, when I first learned about Dr. Ben Carson, actually, in Sunday school. My Sunday school teacher had let us watch a documentary on Dr. Ben Carson, and I was inspired. And he achieved a lot for, I think, our community. And I looked up to him, so I was like, I want to be like him. And so initially, I wanted to be a neurosurgeon. Actually, if you would have spoken to me at the time when you met me through your wife, I would have probably told you that. And as time progressed, I realized that's a lot of responsibility. Not that I'm not happy to be responsible, but it's a lot of pressure to have someone's brain in your hand. I was like, maybe I should rethink this. And so then I switched over to pediatrics. That was my next goal. So when I was still at Work Academy and on my way to university, that was my plan, was to go to do medicine and become a pediatrician.
Okay.
A lot of people don't know that. Currently.
Neither do I. Learning some new stuff, so it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And actually, I'll just throw this in terms of the education to me and to you, and I guess many people is very important. And for Ben Carson, the Ben Carson story, with Ben Carson reflection that I'm familiar with is that he was relatively bright. I think he had at least one. And the story I remember was that he used to have to do book reports, and his mother was not able to easily either read or comprehend and really follow what he was doing.
Right.
However, she was able to continue to keep him inspired because she asked him about the work.
Exactly.
Not that she understood,
Right.
but about the work. And from that, I've always maintained now that the parental involvement in a child's education is probably one of the biggest determinant of their child's success. So it's not so much the physical school premises, the teachers per se, but more so preparing the children to be at a young age, and always ensuring that you inspire them by showing them that you are actually interested. So, yeah.
And I have to at this point, because I've done a number of interviews over the last few months, and I've never, I don't think, said who my parents were. And a lot of people don't know who they are. And people, when they see them, I some have asked, are they are they related to me somehow? Because obviously I have the same last name. I'm like, oh, is that your cousin? Like, no, that's my daughter. So I'm using this opportunity now to let Bermuda know who my parents are. So my father is Ellington Weldon, who is probably, yeah, I was gonna say probably more so known as the striker for Devonshire Colts for many years. And my mother was Carrie Smith, and now is Carrie Weldon, who went to the Barkley. I've always told that. And so that's who my parents are. And as you're saying, they, from the very beginning, I was the fresh child, so I like to say I was the experiment, and they got it right. And I think part of that, yeah, I think so. I think part of that is like exactly what you said. They were very involved from the beginning, and not hesitant to listen to others who knew or was able to perceive what was going on with me better than them. So someone who I know very well was involved in my story and development is Karen Birch, who was actually at Orr Preschool and was my teacher there. She kind of saw that, I was excelling at certain things. I'm told that I was, I could say the alphabet forwards and backwards in the same pace. When it came to going outside, I'm told, because I remember this, we had to spell our name to go outside to play. And so I would obviously spell my name, but then my friends wasn't able to, and so I would just be spelling the name for them so they can go outside. So these types of things. And so she was able to let my parents know from that age of 4 that we need to push her. And my parents listened, and they did all the way through. So I think that's, for me, a big part of my story, is my parents have been there throughout. And I know my dad's probably tearing up now. Always does. He always does. But it's true. I wouldn't be where I am now if it wasn't from the strong and consistent support from my parents. Now, I don't know at which point what I did went over their heads, because at this point they couldn't really tell you in detail what I did for my PhD or for my undergraduate. But like you said, they just wanted to know what I was doing. They couldn't necessarily understand it, but just to keep me engaged, they were asking me how was it going, and I think that's key.
Actually, that's quite an interesting point, because I was going to ask you, at what point did you realize that you knew more than your parents? And I'm saying that because I have 2 children, as you know, Jordan and Karen. And some time ago now, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I think I realized that the pace of learning is now much more accelerated than it was many, many years ago when I was coming through. And part of that is just the sheer access to information and the volume of information and how you can actually track it very, very efficiently. And I jokingly said one day, wow, they're at a stage now whereby they know more than me. Not about everything, of course, but in certain academic perspectives, they do know more than I do.
Right.
And then now my son Kevin is actually doing calculus. And at first when he was going through, right, it wasn't easy in terms of understanding, say, the fundamentals of algebra. But now when I see him doing his work on mine, I know that I could not easily go back that far and come forward. And so I appreciate how children learn more. So at what point did you realize you knew more than them? And more than that, how did you track it whereby you didn't try to throw it at them, or did you throw it at them in terms of, I know what I'm right?
What? Yeah, threw it at them many times.
And how did they manage?
Obviously, I have a different side to the story than they would, but I remember.
You're here now, so give us your side.
I remember very fondly. I'll be told, go study for your math test, and I'm like, I don't need to. But I would just go in my room and just sit there and probably with my phone or do other things. I knew I didn't need to study, because I already knew it. Like I would in class, that was my domain. And if any young people are watching, I strongly advise, if you're in class and you don't understand, ask, because it's better you leave the classroom having to ask a question and gain more understanding than to be confused and then leave and then you don't really follow up on it. So I used to ask a lot of questions throughout in any subject, really. But yeah, there was times where of course, rubbed in their face. What?
See, I need a father more than your father, so I'll touch base with you later. And so then, in terms of going to university, did you get to a stage whereby, I'm assuming what you're telling me now is that you excelled in school in Bermuda,
Yes.
which meant you didn't have to necessarily study as much, which meant you were not necessarily challenged. And I'm assuming always or most of the time the top of the class.
Yeah, so I graduated valedictorian from War Academy 2008, past 2008. And when I was doing IB, so I did International Baccalaureate, I think I was predicted 43 points out of 45. So everyone expected me to get in whatever school I applied to. That did not happen. So let's backtrack. I said my goal was at the time to go into pediatrics, do medicine and become a pediatrician. My ultimate goal was to go to Oxford to do that medical degree. And so I applied for medicine in the UK. Well, I'll say this. I applied to the UK, Canada, and the US because my parents need me. I applied to 12 universities. But I really wanted to go to England. And so for medicine, you can only apply to 4 out of the 5 spots because in case you don't get in, because it's really competitive, they want to have a backup. And so I applied to Oxford. That was like top of my list. And I think for medicine, it's the same deadline each year. You have to apply by the 15th of October. And so it's like, I think a few months earlier than the rest because it takes obviously a lot longer to get through all the applications. And I applied 15th of October. I want to say I heard back less than a month later that I did not get an interview. And I remember thinking my whole life was shattered and done because that was my dream, right?
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember getting the result and I was just in my room and I saw all of them. I am a crybaby. Everyone who knows me knows that. And I cried and cried and cried. And I remember I went to school the next day. I was still in tears. And I went to Mrs. McCorkle, who at the time was the head of sixth form before she became principal. And I told her, look, I don't know what to do. Yeah, I failed. And so I remember she pulled out the big book that was on her shelf and opened it up. It just felt like she opened it up and just pointed to the school, like, apply here. I was like, okay. And it happened to be University of Leicester, which is where I ended up going, mainly because I didn't get into any of the other medical schools either. And it definitely messed with my head, to be very honest, because like I said, I have been riding this wave and I have been, top of my year, top of my class, prize giving, I will get all the prizes, math, science, and then to get to this point where I'm literally predicted more than what you need to get in the course and then not be offered a place. I couldn't understand it. Because I'm used to putting in the effort and getting the result. Now I put in the effort and I didn't get the result. What do I do? And so that was a struggle, but everything happens for a reason, right? And I don't think if I had went the medical route and went to Oxford at that time, that I'll be sitting here with you right now talking about how I helped Rita in the pandemic. I don't think I would be doing that because I wouldn't be a research scientist. So everything happens for a reason. And now that I see where I have ended up, I can talk and smile about that day when I found out I didn't get an interview, but at the time it wasn't nice.
And actually, not to press it too far, but I think it's interesting to those who are listening to us and to myself also, is to even explore a little bit more the idea of you always successful, and then when you should have been reaching your pinnacle, didn't do so.
Yeah.
Now, how did you deal with that? I know you said that you got the result, you're in your room crying.
Yeah.
I take that, but what beyond that did you do? Because I think many persons do experience what we think is failure, which is not really failure. What did you do to actually get yourself motivated again, or to start to read or to believe in yourself again, having had such devastation? And how old were you at that stage?
I was 17.
At 17, so
yeah.
Tell us about that.
So I can't really remember what happened after that. I just know that I was told to apply to the University of Leicester, and I did. And then I got in, like within a matter of weeks. And I know that helped a bit. Okay, at least I could get into a university, right? So that was useful. But then I did, like I mentioned, got rejected from the other medical school, so that kind of messed with me. But because I already had the University of Leicester as the backup, and I wanted to go to England, and I was prepared to get, like I said, applied to Canada, UK, US, and I got into those universities, but I didn't want to go, I wasn't interested. I got into McGill, and my pediatrician, it was Dr. Parenti, but he went to McGill, and he was like, I want to go to there. I was like, So I just really wanted to go to England for some reason. And I think, obviously, I put more effort into my schoolwork, and I hadn't graduated yet. I still had to achieve my results. So I guess I didn't have much time to wallow in my sorrows, because it was final year, our academy scholarship applications were due, or the course rep was due. It was a lot going on. It wasn't much time. And also, I have to say this, in that year, we had 2 deaths at work, 2 students that died within a 6-week period. It was crazy. And I was actually the peer mentor in sixth form. So like I was having to console people. We had one student, Carika, who had a brain aneurysm after a PE class.
Yeah.
And he didn't die instantly, but he had been flown out. And they had Miguel Franco, who had been in a bike accident, and he passed away as well. That was within 6 weeks. So things like that, and I mentioned them because it kind of brought things to reality, like, hey, you're still here, let's keep going. But I will say, when I got to England and I started my degree, I was not a model citizen at all. I was very like, okay, I know all this already. What's the point of me going to lectures? I didn't go to lectures my first year. I was actually the one.
Your parents did this, correct?
Yeah,
Okay, good.
yeah. I had to let it out. I had to confess. Not long after. But I felt, the IB prepared me, and I took it the wrong way, and I said, well, I don't have to go to class. And I had a cousin who was in the same degree, so I was like, just sign me in. And I think probably me being, my own time, took liberties. But it definitely hit me by second year, because I realized I couldn't keep up that act. In first year, I did get a first. So in England, you have the highest designation of a degree as a first class. I did get that, so I tried to continue my partying style and lifestyle in second year, but it did.
And that's good, because I think sometimes we look at people, right, and we see, okay, fine, we see all these successes, all the positives, and not necessarily the rest of the story.
Exactly.
And before we go much further, what do you do beyond the academic? What does Carika do for fun besides the party?
Well, I don't party anymore, but I play tennis, and I picked that up actually when I was doing IB as a sport, and I've been doing that since. And I'm a musician as well, so I play violin. And I picked up trumpet in university as well, but don't quote me on that. No one asked me to play trumpet. But yeah, I'm classically trained as a violinist.
So you that you can't have a life that's pure academics, because then you become boring and all the rest of it.
Right.
Okay, gotcha.
And I think a perception that people also assume about me is that I like to read books, and I really don't.
Okay. Netflix is you.
No.
Okay, so now talk to us about the fact that, yes, you wanted to be a medical doctor, pediatrician at first, following the neuroscience first, then pediatrician, following up the constant. Okay. Now talk to us about how, I know we talked about the university challenges. At what point did you say, okay, fine, now not medical doctor and scientist, and also please differentiate for us the difference between a medical doctor and a scientist. How are they similar and how are they dissimilar?
Okay, so this is another failure story. So I, like I mentioned, applied to university from Bermuda to go into medicine. Didn't get it. The course I was doing at University of Leicester was medical biochemistry, and the first year was the exact same as the medical degree. And so they had this opportunity for, I think, 1 or 2 people in each year from the medical associated degrees to then try to transfer over to medicine, because you've essentially done the same thing in that first year. You have to get a first at the end of the year, and then you have to do a UK CAT, which is like an aptitude test, and then you have an interview, and then they pick someone. And so both me and my cousin, Jordan Simmons, who is a medical doctor now, she both, in that first year, we both wanted to transfer. And so we both went up together to New York to do our UK CAT, which we couldn't do in Bermuda at the time. And we were exempt prior because we were in Bermuda, but because we had been in the UK for that year, we were now expected to take it. It's a test you do on a computer. And I had finished slightly before her, so I came on. They're supposed to give you a result right away. Didn't get a result. So they said, okay, just give us a few more minutes, maybe the computer's processing. I said, okay. Jordan came out and she got her result. I still have mine. So I said, okay, what do I do? So they said, okay, just give it a few days, it might be sorted by then. So we flew back to Bermuda. At the time, I think we were both working in the hospital in the layup as summer students. And a few days went by, still no results. I called them and they said, oh, it's like we never took the test. I'm like, what? Like, I literally just flew to New York to take the test. And so they said, okay, we'll give you another exemption because obviously you went to take it and you did try, but it didn't register your results. And that was painful. I cried again.
Okay.
And then come to find out that to get an interview, you need 30 points, and I got 29. And I was like, I wonder what if that I got the result for that, that UK cap. So didn't get the second time through, and I just took that as a sign. I was like, I'm not gonna try for a third time. No thanks. And so at that point, I was all over the place. My parents would tell you that I was picking any which career possible. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And it was only when I got into third year, which is the final year in England, when you have to do a research project, and that's when I fell in love with research. And so to answer your other question, the difference between a medical doctor and a research scientist is that a medical doctor is face-to-face with patients. So they're more on the clinical side. You deal directly with those who are affected by disease, you're trying to treat them. Whereas a research scientist is doing the background work, I would say, in terms of trying to figure out what's causing the disease, how to be treated. So I guess my analogy is when you go and you get a drug prescribed by your doctor, a research scientist has created that drug, but it's the doctor that's giving it to you. So there's a really nice relationship there, and that's why medical doctors, I've been watching Grey's Anatomy a lot recently. I don't know if anyone else watched that. So you see there's a very fine line between the two, because you can't do research if you don't think about, okay, what's affecting people. And then you can't help people if you don't know what's been researched and what's the latest. So it's very much interconnected.
Okay, that's a good segue actually to now let's talk about the coronavirus. So I guess tell us how your research helped you or made you made you effective, or a person for people to look to come and help us. How did that whole process work? Even just the mechanics of it, like how did somebody even say, well, let's call Dr. Weldon? Did you call them, or how did it all work to get you to say, you know what, I'll consider, because at that stage you were a lecturer, yes?
I wasn't a lecturer, I was at Oxford. I was a research scientist. I had gone completely back into research. Before I was in Leicester at Demography University being a lecturer, but I had left and went to Oxford in the end of 2018. But at the time, I had just come back off vacation, actually, it was the end of March. But I'll backtrack. When I went to Leicester, I remember I said everything happens for a reason. When it came to doing that third year project, we had like a list of people, so lecturers that had proposed projects, and we had to pick which one we wanted to do. I remember picking like the night before the deadline, just, last minute.
Procrastination.
Yep. And I think you had to pick 5. 1, 2, and 3, I really thought about. I was like, I really want to do these. And then 4 and 5 was just like, just to fill up the gaps. I ended up getting my 4th choice. And I remember I was like,
as in you chose number 1, didn't get that.
Didn't get that.
2, 3,
no, number 4. And I was like, who's this guy? And I was like, I remember having a lecture with him. I remember he was like kind of scary as well. I'm like, oh my God, how did this happen? And so when I went to meet my new supervisor for my project, he happens to be in the university, one of the only RNA labs.
Explain that.
Now, I know that might sound familiar. I'll tie it in a minute. So his projects that he gave me were all based on RNA, and he, explained them, and I really enjoyed it. That's why I ended up doing my PhD, also on RNA. Now, fast forward to March. Oh, if I go back a little bit, I started a charity in 2016 called the Principles Foundation, which brings scientists to the island, and we have a conference every year, and that's all RNA scientists. That's because that's what my field is. My field of research is in RNA. Now, I've said that word a lot of times in the last 5 minutes, so explain what that is, as opposed to DNA. So DNA, people are more familiar with. It is your genetic makeup. It's chemically very similar to RNA. RNA is, so if anyone watching knows what DNA stands for, DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid.
Okay, doctor.
RNA is just ribonucleic acid, so it's not got the first deoxy bit, that's all. And that's a structural change in terms of chemistry when it comes to the two. But RNA science is, I guess, younger and is not as well known as DNA science, because DNA was actually discovered first, and then RNA was discovered afterwards. It can be argued, and obviously I'm biased, the RNA is more important, but I'll leave that. And so now fast forward to March, when we have an RNA virus. Coronavirus is an RNA virus. So when it comes to viruses, you have DNA or RNA virus. They have 1 or 2 of their genetic materials, and one or 2 of these materials. So I have studied and worked with RNA for 10 years at this point. And here is coronavirus, an RNA virus. And the techniques used to do the test is what I've been doing the last 10 years in my research. And so that's why I say everything happens for a reason, because had I not gotten into Oxford, I wouldn't have done that RNA project. I wouldn't have become an RNA scientist, and I would not be a specialist in it for coronavirus. So I think it all kind of led me to this point. And you asked, how did I get involved? I was called initially by Roche to ask, okay, how do we do testing of this virus? I explained it, and it was said to be.
Remember, the general public does not know some of these things, right?
Right, yes.
So who are Roche and why would they be interested in all this kind of thing?
Yes, so, okay, backtrack. Roche is a international biotech company. I have used some of their products or, their reagents in my research. It's a household name for scientists, if I can put it that way. And so their head of finance is in Bermuda. And are you familiar with the Orange Science Week that the Bermuda College has?
Me, but not the audience.
Okay, so Bermuda College has a science week every year, and it's called the Orange Science Week. And I believe Roche bought Orange recently, and so they are involved in that. And I was the guest speaker for that in 2019. Okay. And so that's how I initially met the head of Roche. And so, I was initially called, okay, how do we get testing on Ireland? They wanted to help expand testing. And since that day on March 26th, I had been living this life of COVID. I haven't had a day without it, apart from the 2 hurricanes, actually. I was very excited I was very let down as well by Epsilon. But anyway, and that's how it all kind of happened.
And so you were called. It's interesting, by the way, because sometimes we don't really appreciate how international business ties into our daily lives.
Exactly.
In this context, of course, the grant actually had donated to the college some time ago when they set up the day of it, so that's why they all tied in, right?
Exactly.
Which is a good thing. And so, again, it shows how our everyday lives can be impacted by persons who would sponsor otherwise. And again, even as I tell young people, certainly now, you never know who you're going to meet and when the relationship itself will take hold.
Yes.
And as you said, you met the CFO in Bermuda?
The president, yes.
President.
That was
and when you needed to.
2019, yeah.
Exactly. And so a year later, just about, they would think, okay, fine, who can assist us in this? Oh, Dr. Weldon and called you. And so now, how did that then translate to you actually come here? Because I think there was a point in time where you were not intended to be here full time.
No, I was not. I actually joke. I was on holiday, like I said, in Nigeria at the time.
That's why.
At the time, and that's when it was first kind of, the idea was thrown, but not by Roche, but by someone else. Like, would you be happy to come back? And I was like, if I need to, but I think it's fine. I'm happy where I am. I actually want to get stuck there, but I end up being on the I end up being on the final flight out of Nigeria before they closed the airport. So that, I couldn't fight that. And I made it back to England, and I was very happy. I was, I made it through Heathrow, and I was doing my own little isolation for 2 weeks in my room, and very happy to not have to interact with anyone. Because at the time in England, I came back and there was no rice, there was no pasta, there was nothing on the shelf, because everyone was just panic buying. So I was just really happy to have made it back and be safe. And that's when I got the call a few days into that week, the first week back for me. And within 2 weeks of me landing in England, I was now about to get a flight to Bermuda. Yeah.
Okay, now good. Now let's talk about the actual coronavirus.
Okay.
Where did it start?
Where did it start?
Yeah. What's the scientific explanation as to not so much where it started, but how did it start? What is this thing and why is it new? Like, how do we get it?
Okay, you're talking about this COVID-19?
Yes.
Okay, so just a bit of background. So coronaviruses have been around for a very long time. I think if you think back to the start of the pandemic, there was a picture of Lysol going around everywhere. And it was like, it had human coronavirus on the back of the types of viruses that it killed. And everyone was like, what? This is fake. Lysol knew about this years ago. This can't be real. Right. So that's because there are a lot of different types of coronaviruses. So when we say coronavirus, we're actually not being very specific. We're kind of talking very general. Just like your last name is Richardson.
Yes.
Right, if you say Richardson, there's loads of Richardsons in Bermuda, right? That's a family name.
Yes.
Coronavirus is a family name for this particular type of virus. When you start to look at specifics, obviously here, Anthony,
Yes.
that's where you start to look at, okay, COVID-19, or in this case, SARS-CoV-2, which is this particular virus. So coronaviruses have been around for a while. A lot of them that do happen to infect humans, I think the consensus is that they started in animals first, and they do transmit within animals, but then they have to have some type of mutation that allows them to infect humans. Just because it's in an animal doesn't mean that it will negatively affect us. So there has to be some type of genetic change that allows it to then be able to infect humans.
And again, explain that, because let's just say, for example, the coronavirus is an animal, my dog, let's call it, right? And I play with my dog, do whatever. It will not transmit necessarily, or
so let's not use dog, because I don't want people to start calling me and saying, my dog's got coronavirus.
Okay.
So it started in bats.
Okay.
This type of virus or this family seem to originate in bats.
Okay, so it's in a bat, and I happen to be exposed to the bats. Why would it not have affected me all the time? What actually changed in 2019 or whenever it happened to allow it to become a human issue?
So I don't know if we know that picture fully. That is now where research science comes in, because so the science that I do as the type of doctor I am, because you then need to understand how does the virus work? What is the makeup of the virus? I don't know if you've heard the term spike protein. No? So there's different parts of the virus that do certain things. And one of the things one of the parts of the virus that is very much talked about is the spike protein. Now, the coronavirus is called coronavirus. Corona is, I believe, Latin for crown. So when you look at it from the top on a microscope, it actually looks like a crown is looking down on a crown. And so on the outside, it has these spikes, and that's what we call the spike protein, that then latch to whatever it's nearby. So for us now, what makes this virus so, I would say, not lethal, but obviously very virulent, yes, is the fact that these spike proteins obviously can attach to your respiratory system, and hence it gives you the illness. I don't know, and I'm not sure anyone 100% knows what changed that caused it now to be in humans and to be so virulent. There are obviously many thoughts around what could have happened. I will say I am a scientist, but I am also human. Yeah, not that those two can't be at the same time. And I do wonder what really went on. I think, like I've said many times before, I will be looking for the Netflix documentary in 2022-ish, hopefully, to see what actually happened. Because I think, yes, from a scientific standpoint, I think there's been some papers or some research to show that this wasn't created in a lab. But I'm just wondering why this one has taken over the world like this. It just seems very weird to me.
Okay.
And
So,
my opinion.
so paint the picture for us in the audience, young person, for example. So you're saying that the virus itself has the spikes from the crown, has a crown.
So it doesn't have a crown. It looks like a crown. If you look at it from the top, it's a circle, and then it has these things sticking out.
Which allow it to physically
Exactly.
Okay.
Kind of like, you have like that ball
Yes, I know.
that has like the sticky thing that
Yes.
looks like that. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly like that. So that allows it to stick to whatever surface is nearby.
Okay, and to those in listening audience again, it's going to be a challenge to talk about all the things now, because I've talked to you in the past, so we're going to jump back and forth, and hopefully we will be able to find another time to come back and have a part two.
Yes.
So we're going to jump around a little bit. But I talked to you before in terms of the actual test, and I think you told me it's a question of, explain to us what you do to actually test. So Anthony, you get this swab.
Yes.
And I was going to actually do something live and be tested on camera. I said, not today.
Well, I couldn't do that anyway.
No, not you, but I can have somebody come and do that.
Okay.
So explain what the actual swab is doing, and then how it gets to you and what you do in the lab. And I also want to make sure that we have time to commend your team or to recognize your team.
Yes.
Because I think that's where That's not, I know that's why we became really interested in terms of, and I had to come to the lab to see that there were so many young people, but let's make sure we get to that. But right now, talk about the actual test, what it means and what you have to do, and the time and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so when you or anyone goes to be swabbed by, when you maybe travel back or when it's a pop-up, they are using a swab because it's soft and it will collect sample, it will collect some cells in your nasopharyngeal region. So that, I think everyone probably is as scientific to say nasopharyngeal. That word is like, I would think the word is here, other than coronavirus. So the nasopharyngeal region is where your nose and your mouth kind of connect.
Okay.
All right, so you can reach it from your nose, from either nostril, or you can reach it from your mouth, right? And so in that region is where, if you have the virus, it will be sitting and chilling. You can put it that way.
Okay.
It'll be just chilling in that region. And so, not to say that if you are infected with the virus, it has to be there, but most times it is. And that's where this question about how accurate is the test, it really comes down to where, if you have the virus, where is the virus located in your body? But what happens is they will take the swab. I have my most recent one on Thursday. Goes down your nose. You can test it from your mouth, but obviously you have your gag reflex, so it's not as comfortable. No, it is a nose, but we have to get to that point in your body. So we take a swab. It goes into a liquid. Now that liquid we call media because it's actually created to allow the virus, if it's there, to grow and to be stable. All right, so it won't be destroyed. It will keep it safe, right?
Multiply.
In order to multiply, yes. And so that is why when you get a swab taken, you will see that it's put on ice, because if you put it on ice, it will allow the virus to not be destroyed. If you have it too hot, like our summer weather here, it will potentially kill the virus, and the RNA, which is the genetic material, potentially could start to be degraded or break down. And when it gets to us, we might not be able to pick up anything, even though something was there. So that's why it has to be on ice, and that's what we call the cold chain.
And actually, most people don't realize it, of course, because all we do is you come back,
Right.
get tested, and that's all we do.
Right.
But explain it
This
to
is
the
all the
person, they don't know
background.
that, right?
Yeah.
So what happens is, between the swab being taken at the airport or the
Mhm.
ports, because those happens when yachts
Yes.
come to the island, of
Yeah.
course, they are capped on ice and then transmitted or transported to yourself at the lab.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. So when we get them on ice, and we put them onto our own ice. And at that point, we have to check the date of birth and name matches, and we then put them into smaller groups that we call pools. Now, the pooling method, which I think is something that has been in conversation in the US and globally, is used in many countries. It's something that was told to me by a scientist in Germany prior to me coming here. And I think without that advice, we wouldn't be where we are now, because we wouldn't have been able to keep up and do as much testing as we can.
And we talked this before, but explain now in terms of volume, because
Yeah.
I know that if you go back maybe several weeks now, I suppose, there was a question in terms of the degree to which you, as the person responsible for the lab,
Mhm.
or you and your team actually could cope with the volumes,
Yes.
because initially you did maybe 100, let's say,
Yeah,
and now
we
you've
did
reported a few times. What's the most you've done in a day?
I believe that was, we got 986 one day.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that actually yesterday we got 970, didn't feel like it.
Well,
But we-
and so
yeah,
again,
but-
so in terms of volume, the public would need to understand that what you're talking about, the technique is how you're able to scale up and do that
Exactly.
with a relatively small team. Because how many people are on the team activated?
At the moment, we have around 12 or 13.
Let's say
At the
12
moment,
people.
but over
right?
the summer, up until before the airport opened, it was 4.
So we are talking about 4 people, let's say 10 people, just for argument's sake, being able to process up to almost 1,000 samples.
Yeah.
And so now talk to us about how you learned about a technique that I believe allowed you to have a greater capacity than even many US labs, which is why we're able to process number of samples that we have in as fast a time as we do. So talk about that.
So it literally comes down to cooling. That's the one word. Because normally if you do one person at a time, the extract or the PCR machine, so that's the other word of the year PCR. The PCR machine is able to do, you can use a plate. Now, I know when I say plate, you're thinking of dinner, which is dinner time, and I'm hungry. But when I say plate, I'm talking about something that allows you to put 96 reactions in it. That goes into the machine. So that's how much you can do at once. If you're doing one at a time, you could do up to 94 people at once, because we need to have two for our controls to make sure that everything is working properly. But now, if you start to pool, let's just say we did 2 people in one well at a time, that doubles it.
Okay.
If you do 4, that's times 4. If you do 8, that's times 8. And so what we initially started out doing was doing 4 people in a group, and that meant that we were able to stretch all of our resources 4 times longer. The time it takes to handle that one plate or the samples is the same. So it's not because you have put more samples into one well or one position that it takes longer. Maybe it takes a little bit longer to handle them in the beginning, but ultimately you can still get them turned around in that 6 to 8 hour turnaround time. And so that's really the key to everything. If anyone was to ask me, that's what I would say.
And so knowing that, I guess the obvious question would be, why isn't that same technique utilized in the US, for example, to allow them to have fast results? Because there is, continuous challenges with the US.
Yeah, I think the US situation has become very political. I've never met Dr. Fauci. I don't know if I ever will, but he has taken a battering. And he's actually the person that went to the US Senate to tell them we should do bullying. And I don't know how far that went or why it didn't get taken on. I know I think there's one type of lab or a brand of a lab that was starting to do, but I'm not sure what happened with that either. But that definitely help the US.
So is it correct, I'm asking, I guess, in terms of that, if the US were using your method of pooling, not your method, but the pooling method, then there would be an acceleration of the number of tests they could do on a daily basis?
In an instant. I mean, that's what other European countries have done. So if we look at places like Germany, right? That's people look at, they did great. They were pooling from March. That's where we got it from. Yeah.
Great.
So.
Okay, so now again, I want to make sure we don't miss this. Talk to me or talk to us about your team, because if I remember correctly, well, I know you are less than 40, let's say. Young.
I started this when I was in my 20s, and no, I'm not.
But what's amazing to me is that I think the persons in the lab, if I'm not mistaken, were probably all less than probably 25, for example. Or most of them less than 25. So explain to us, I don't like to ask it because sometimes we miss people, right? But who was actually there helping you, and what did they do? And how long did they work also? Because I think all those things for me were incredible to come, and sometimes, as you know, I would come in the morning time around, let's say 9 or 10 or 11. I'll also come late at night, and very often the same people there every day.
Right.
So explain to me how you were able to get those young people, and the degree to which we should be collectively appreciative of what they did as a team. Thank you.
And I think, yeah, you hit it spot on. This is all the background work, and this is why when I was growing up, I never even thought about this type of career, because it's not really something that is out there, right? It's really background. And this is not to say just even our lab that is doing COVID testing. This is like every result that you've ever gotten for healthcare has been done by a person in the lab that you probably never even thought about, right? You go to your doctor and you say, okay, I'm feeling bad. And say, oh, let's take a blood test. That blood goes to a lab, and there are people that work that shit 12 hours, 8 hours, back to back to back, and they push them out. So first I want to just shout out to all of the med techs and biomedical scientists in Bermuda, because we wouldn't be anywhere if we didn't have them. And that's a field that is always overlooked. No one says, I want to thank that person that got my CBC count. No one says that.
Okay.
And so first I want to do that. Now, when it came to coronavirus, obviously it's kind of on the platform, and it's highlighted more because this is the test that we need, to know what's happening with our country. Initially, I've always been very big on training, and knowing that I didn't know about this career when I was younger, I've always wanted to highlight it to the young people. So that's where the outreach comes in with my charity and stuff that I was doing. Now, in this scenario, obviously it's crunch time, right? And I know for me, I got a real sense of purpose from being asked to come back and do testing. I was like, this is why I'm in this field. And I felt it was a great opportunity to also give that same purpose to young people. So one of the things I want to point out is that I actually flew in to the country, right? I think everyone knows that. But if you think about the logistics of that, I could not have been doing testing because I was in quarantine 14 days, right? So I landed on the 6th of April. I didn't come out of a hotel room until the 21st, and I was very happy to do so. And in order to do that, there was a team at the lab that we just created the day prior, on the 19th of April, doing the testing, right? So I can't name everyone because some of them said they don't want to, but one definitely is the student who you probably met is Jordan Baskin.
Yes.
And she has grown from strength to strength. She's now kind of in charge of the other students, and she's really grown into, but it came about because there was a call put out that, look, we need young people in order to do testing, who can come by. So I want to say that I was not in the initial testing that MDL did. I was one of the people tested, but I didn't do the initial test, and so I want to make sure that's known. And then after that, my job was to try to find more young people, and I had someone, I think it was announced in the press conference what we were doing, and then someone emailed, said, oh, can I join? And someone else said, oh, I have a nephew that would like to get involved, and it was through Facebook, it was through emails.
Okay.
And that's how we assembled the initial team. And another one, well, Taylor,
Yeah.
Taylor Sumner, so Dylan, Molden, and Philip Burgess, they were one via Facebook and one via email. And then Taylor Sumner, these are the core four that were here, at the very beginning. She was actually a swabber. And yeah, so she got trained as a swabber at the Southside site and was like, can I come to the lab? Can I come to the lab? And so, she was doing biomedical science in England. And so she came and, she caught on. And so she actually came that route. So they all came their different ways. And yeah, we would be there a lot.
Yeah.
It was challenging at first, because initially we didn't have flights every day. So we did have some days off. So that was nice. Wow, thinking back to that. But obviously, as time went on, we realized, we were trying to hit 200 tests a day as a country.
Yes.
I think back to that and just smile. Yeah, and if we get 200 tests a day now, everyone will be wondering what's going on. And then quickly, obviously, when the airport was starting to come, we realized this is going to exponentially increase. And then we started to get more staff. We actually had interns. When I did my press conference and I gave the whole country my email, which I probably, in hindsight, wouldn't have done. But I did that because I wanted to make sure we got any and everyone that was interested. We had interns coming through every week around near cup match and after, trying out the lens, seeing how it was, and we ended up just hiring interns after they'd done the intern week. And that's how we've kind of grown up our team now. And so, yeah, it's grueling. We've kind of got more regimented now because it has to be sustainable. So we have an 8-hour shift from 9 to 5, and a 5 to 1 shift. Actually, today is going to be an exception because of the lovely PGA that is here. Yes, we have a lot of people flying in, so we'll be extending our hours a bit today. But yeah, it's become a 16-hour a day, 7-day-a-week operation now.
And actually, you may not know, you do know actually that you just mentioned the PGA Championship, and then there's of course the sailing and the rugby.
Yes, I found out about sailing yesterday.
Yeah, and we know that, well, I know from my own job, what I do is that tomorrow's going to be a very busy day, that we have probably, I think it's probably about 18 flights coming in on the private jets,
yes.
Right? Which means many, many people, an extended day. But that does bode well because, as you do know, one of the results of your work, you and your team, is that Bermuda has been very widely regarded worldwide for how we have managed the COVID-19. Created on government MP now, and so I know that one of the big things in the PLP success also, in fact, was how the Premier David Burke was perceived to have managed the COVID-19 with his team, and so you and your team again deserve a lot of credit. But as a result of that, we're now getting all the visitors coming in.
Yes.
And so, as best you can, and I know that you are not the public health person,
no.
But talk to us now in terms of what your message would be to us as Bermudians, as residents, about what we should do scientifically, what we should do to prepare ourselves and as best we can protect us and others
Right.
from catching the virus.
I think I can only echo the words I saw recently from the epidemiologist in the Ministry of Health, Taiwan De Rosa. We have to keep at what we're doing. We can't slack. So the mask wearing, in public where you're within 6 feet, the hand washing. I mean, these are simple things that you think are not working, but they are. And you can see one of the other differences, yes, between us and the US is the fact that we have a higher testing capacity per population, but also it's the compliance to just follow these rules that have been set by the government. And I think we have done very well because everyone is like, feels like they own these rules. And if they see you, they're like, oh, what? We're already like that.
Yeah.
Where again? What? No, people have taken it with COVID. Where again? But in mask, washing hands. That public responsibility, I think, has gotten us this far. Yes, it's testing, but it's definitely been a country effort to get us here. Because we obviously can isolate who is positive, but we have the team that then contact traces and says, okay, you need to be tested, and you need to be isolated. That process, we have got down to a science. And that's what other countries have been able to do. They can even tell you who's positive, but they can't call everyone who's a contact and tell them. So it's a lot of downstream effort and work as well that has gotten us to where we are. And then obviously us as the public, yes, I saw, we have PGA, we have sailing, we have rugby classic, we have all these people coming in. It's kind of like a blessing and a curse. Yes, obviously we want more people because it will help our economy, but they potentially bring the cuties, as we call them. So it's just to stay with what we're doing. Do not get comfortable. Wear your mask. Just treat everyone as if they're infectious.
So this is the challenge. There are no or very few cases in Bermuda, and we don't have local spread,
right?
Community spread, so the virus is not here,
right?
For all intents and
for
purposes,
us, yeah.
Right? And so, how do we convince persons that it's not here? So why should I wear a mask? Because that's what I think is people now, because there's been such success, they're becoming less
inclined to
worried or inclined.
Right.
Yes. So how do you tell me scientifically that, Anthony, yes, there is still the risk if we're then saying the virus is not here?
Okay, I'll try and do it mathematically. And I know we're almost running out of time. If we have one person that comes into the island, and again, I saw this when the epidemiologist was speaking. They have a very nice video the government has made. If we have one person that isn't detected for COVID-19, so say they are a false negative and they get missed. If we are not wearing our mask and we're not socially distancing ourselves, that literally can become 200 people very quickly. And in our context, 200 people is a lot. Because then that 200 people can become 400 and then 800 and then, right? We have more than one contact a day. But even if one was able to spread it to one, it can quickly become, we're not that big, we're only 22 miles.
Okay, that's, I think, a good point. So paint me the picture now how one becomes 200 in a short period of time.
So one person in one day can contact 10 people, have close contact with 10 people. Even if 10%, that's one, right? That's not two. Now that part, 2 people now also 4, and then we're talking about the exponential increase, 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, over a matter of a few weeks, that would definitely grow if it's not detected and we don't catch it. And so we have to just stick to what we're doing. We've gotten this far because we've stuck to our guns. We have a very solid border control, but we have to think, what if someone slips through the cracks? I think that's what I always think. What if we miss someone? Then what? And that's what we have to just stick to wearing our masks, washing our hands, socially distancing. Yes, get tested if you feel the need. If you're working out, like I said, I tested a few days ago. Sure. I get tested every 2 weeks just to be sure. But yeah, let's stick to what we've been doing. Let's not fix it if it ain't broke. That's my message. Let's not fix it because it ain't broke.
Okay, brilliant. Clearly, as I said from the beginning, time we run out of time. It's a very interesting topic, and we can just don't have the time to do it all the time. So I want to thank you on behalf of me and my team, my production team, and hopefully be able to encourage you to come back again, but we can go into some more detail in terms of the further advice
Mhm.
and any further development that may or may not take place in Bermuda, and anything else you want to tell us so that we can better learn, and for the general public, they can be better positioned in terms of understanding why and why not. And so we want to commend you and your team. And as we get into Christmas, for example,
Yes.
there's going to be more and more flights. We just talked about the fact that the unintended or intended consequence almost of a good COVID experience has been more people coming to the island.
Yes, yeah.
And we see that we need that now, of course, from a political side to ensure we get the economy running again. And so again, I want to thank you and welcome you hopefully to come back another time. And to those in the listening audience, I said at the beginning and I'll say it again that the idea of these virtual talks is to be able to bring to the public's attention things that they ask me about, so to provide more detail, the other things that I'm interested in, and almost to provide a relaxed conversation around different things, because we have so many people in the public eye that we see but don't really know, and this allows the opportunity for us to explore different avenues as we go forward. And from a general contact point of view, I let everybody know that the contact information primarily for me is to call 538-8683, which actually is 538-VOTE, to allow them to be in touch, or send an email to arichardson@plp.pm. So again, Dr. Carika Weldon, thank you very much. What we didn't get a chance to talk about, by the way, is you as a lecturer, you have a certain style as to how you lecture. So
We'll do it next time. Along with the vaccine, because that's a hot topic as well.
Excellent. So well done again, and thank you. And to all, a very good night. Thank you very much.